welcome everybody to our Wednesday night community conversation. Tonight we're going to focus on micro transit, which is a critical issue. Vermont's an unusual state in that we're so rural that a lot of the standard public transit options apply in some parts of our state, but not in most of our state. So this is there's a lot of great thinking going on about this, and two of the micro transit thought leaders in our state are here with us tonight. Dan Jones from the Sustainable Montpelier Coalition and Ross McDonald from the Agency of Transportation, where he is the public transit program manager. And so we're looking forward to a great conversation. And with that, Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Steve, and hello, everyone. In a little switch, although we will get around to it, the reason we're interested in microtransit as Sustainable Montpelier actually has more to do with energy and land use. So I wanted to give some background on where we're coming from and why in microtransit we think is a major opportunity in the state, and we're grateful to have the state going along with it. And this all started about 6 years ago when the city of Montpelier chose to decide that it was going to be net zero by 2030, although it didn't quite know what that meant. And there was a bit of hoopla around this. It looked like this was a positive direction. There was only one problem with this, which was that Montpelier actually was totally dependent on the car. Okay, it had traffic jams every afternoon of the workday. It had a very small fixed schedule bus system, and it had acres of parking in town, which did not bode well for a town that was going to try and figure out how to be net zero in any kind of reasonable future. So, in fact, there was so much parking in town that we discovered this is a map of downtown Montpelier. Actually a drone shot, and all the red on the map is off-street parking. So you get an idea of how much the real estate in downtown Montpelier is dedicated to housing the car. That's a very difficult position if what you're trying to do is figure out how to be net zero, since over 50% of Vermont's petroleum demand, CO2 demand, comes from transportation. So this is a town that was totally dependent on the burning of fossil fuels. So some of us started to say, well, how can we make a difference in this? What could be done? And we were discovering that actually a principle that isn't often talked about, that land use equals energy use. That we live in a rural sprawl situation. For instance, and even in Montpelier, we're dependent on the car. There's 6,500 cars for 4,000 households in Montpelier. So, and that's a town which is still relatively dense compared to Vermont. The city perceives parking as a economic necessity, and public transit is perceived as a charity. It is something that is provided at a high cost for those people who cannot afford a car. It also means in a town like Montpelier, there's very little downtown public green space. Even though we have a lovely river, we can't get to it. So we're in a situation where we couldn't figure out how do we change this. And a lot of us were beginning to talk on the whole issue of smart growth. You know, how to mix land uses, how to take advantage of building design, have more housing opportunities. You can't house people on parking lots, as it were. How do you create walkable neighborhoods? Foster distinctive, attractive communities, and then provide a variety of transportation choices where we had one and an occasional bus. And then encourage community and stakeholder collaboration. So that last part got us thinking about, well, how would we actually do this? And we came up with the idea of having a design competition. So some of you may have heard about it, the Sustainable Montpelier Design Competition back in 2016-17. And we actually got designs submitted from around the world on how we could have a more sustainable downtown, filling in that space, making more use of it. And we invited the public to be the judges in this. So we had 2 rounds of judges, and we put up a pop-up gallery downtown, which you can see here, where people actually came through, and took this very seriously. I mean, there was a lot of public discussion on it. It was fascinating. And we had a competitive voting. And what we had was this design here, which actually looked at the whole riverfront and had parking basically down here at the each end of town, and then filled in the downtown more with housing, commercial space, and put in new housing spaces along the river, so that we made use of the actual rail link that traveled through the middle of town. So this was a great idea. It had a lot of support, but it was just an idea. So we needed to figure out how to go from vision to action. And in 2017, we created the Sustainable Montpelier Coalition, which we defined ourselves as a mechanism for being a catalyst for change. We weren't necessarily going to be the developer or any of this, but we were going to try and get the process going to make changes. So we began an organizing effort with city businesses, community groups to explore alternatives on how we do things. We started doing sort of public postings, op-eds, etc., to get the understanding that land use does equal energy use. And in the final step in the year, we organized Community Transportation Coalition Roundtable to examine alternatives for getting people downtown without cars. And that included the rail line, that included remote parking, and it included this new concept of microtransit. And we realized a new transit system's got to be convenient and cheap. Local residents have to be able to find this actually preferable. It's, you know, because we're actually only looking at how do we deal with in Montpelier. We were not trying to actually get everybody in from central Vermont. Just in Montpelier, we had enough demand for parking that we could make a change. It had to be flexible and affordable. All right. Many of you may know that the AAA estimates that the average Vermonter spends $8,000 per year per car, which is a large amount of money. So especially for seniors who wanted to downsize, people who did not want to be dependent on cars, there's really very few alternatives. And so we had to begin to imagine how that could happen. But this new system also had to provide paratransit for those who needed to get to the hospital, to doctor's visits, etc., and had very paralysis issues, had other age issues. And it had to provide predictable connections to getting in and out of town. So again, we discovered this whole concept of microtransit. And microtransit, for you who are not completely familiar with it, operates on an app. You can see the app for one of the leading companies on the right side. And it basically can tell you, knows where you're calling from, where you want to come from, and where you want to go. You can enter that in. And then it will basically ship off a van or small bus to where you are. But it's also very smart that it knows that other people in your neighborhood also want to be traveling roughly in the same direction. It's 8 in the morning and a bunch of people want to get downtown. So it knows how to actually do the best routing to pick up multiple people, get them into town or to their destinations simultaneously, so that it reduces the number of cars and is pretty much almost as convenient as your car. It won't pick you up at your door. It might be in the middle of the block, but it's certainly better than walking 4 blocks to a bus stop and waiting. I'm not sure when they, and you can, like on Uber or Lyft, you can actually look at the app and see where the ride is, so you can be pretty well prepared for when it's going to arrive. It's very affordable, and so we thought this was a really great idea, and we would like to see it happen. And the Community Transportation Coalition, helped create that perception through the roundtables that there was a alternative was worth piloting. And the idea of VTrans actually got discussed in some areas of the state government. And a couple of years ago, Ross called me up and said, well, I'm happy to tell you that we're going to have a working group within VTrans to explore what microtransit might mean for Montpelier. And oh, surprise, Sustainable Montpelier is going to be basically doing most of the work. So we were delighted with this, and we spent the last about a year and a half with the working group doing the research necessary on what was happening, and created a white paper recommended the pilot project. That passed the legislature in the session earlier this year, and we're moving forward. And Ross is going to talk more about that, so I'm not going to steal his thunder. What we did was a lot of research and development. We had to find out, where is microtransit succeeding and where is it failing? What are the problems with it? What are the possibilities? Who are the most reliable providers? How cost effective can it really be? How easy is it for public transit agencies to add this as a service? Because it does completely change the nature of what they're doing. And does it make a difference? And we were happy to discover that in places, one of the best test cases we found was West Sacramento, California, where they're actually, really made a difference in not only people's perception of the transit, but in the number of people using it. In fact, it was growing very rapidly when last we checked. So it has a great possibility for actually changing people's perception of transit and how they manage to use it, how they schedule their lives around it. So VTrans and Sustainable Montpelier are building a public-private partnership to ensure a community embrace. We've helped form a community advisory council within town, which means that the town, various sectors will be involved in actually monitoring what goes on, trying to determine the best practices, advise the provider, Green Mountain Transit in this case, on how to really better serve the community. And we're going to be offering a education and engagement process with multiple strategies. And for this, I have to thank Senators Ash and Perchlik, who helped put in some language and funding into the transportation bill that allows for funding of this kind of work so that we can actually be serious about it, reach out to the public. Our first step will be what we call recruiting the do no harm folks, the people who have to use transit right now. So we have to figure out how to get in touch with them, how to get them using it, how that they're going to be integral to the operation. And then we'll spread out to the seniors and get them educated and involved. And we have to do all of this within and build a sense of value within the COVID world, because the safety of the service along with the cost savings has to be paramount. And we actually feel pretty happy about this because we discovered back this earlier in the COVID problem when the GMT was really limiting the number of people on any given bus, that they would have stop in front of the main stop in front of Shaw's downtown, and there might be 4 people waiting. They'd only allow 2 on, and that those other 2 would have to wait for an hour for the bus to get back, which was not actually serving their needs. So it turns out in a microtransit world, the vehicle could have done a fairly quick trip taking the people where they had to go and gotten back to pick up the other 2. So it makes a big difference in our understanding of scheduling, how we can get people using it, how it might happen within the future. Now, we have goals, okay? And our goals and for the microtransit in Montpelier are, we'd like to eliminate the need for 2,000 second cars, because there are 2,000 second cars in Montpelier. There are 4,000 first cars. Now, if we could eliminate those 2,000 second cars using that $8,000 a year number from AAA, which of course no Vermonter pays $8,000 a year, but that's AAA's number, that could mean a savings of $16 million for residents through the reduction in car use. It would then allow some of the parking dedicated real estate downtown to be redeveloped for denser village center work and reimagined streetscapes, a lot more great green space, etc. And it would create new economic options for transportation systems so that we could go beyond just the microtransit, but we might be able to have a car share that actually worked, bike share, other options. So it's a way of beginning to really have a systems approach to the whole option of how do we get people in and out of town, how do we get them around, and what can they do. So that's our our overall plan. We're attempting to provide a systems approach to land and energy use, which says that microtransit is the best available option in a dense center like Montpelier. We're waiting for other options to figure out how to get to the outer burbs, but just within Montpelier, we could make a huge difference in the amount of demand downtown if we could just get the people in town using it. It's a manageable scale within existing resources. So we're not looking at something that is a brand new fleet of electric vehicles, or et cetera. As a matter of fact, electric vehicles, if we did all the transfer of individual vehicles, electric vehicles, it would still demand the same amount of parking space downtown. So this was a different approach to try and get rid of the concept of the single occupancy vehicle always being the use, and figure out how to get more shared resources. And we call it a new economy concept, where we begin to develop the concept of access over ownership. Can we access the services we need, rather than do we actually have to own them individually? So that's the basic concept of microtransit, and thank you for your attention.